Yay! Oh my
Hello.
gosh. Hello, everybody. Wow, that was so great. Amazing. I'm gonna get started and introduce myself. My name is Linda Girón. I'm a local Bay Area playwright, currently broadcasting from Los Angeles at my parents' house and on Serrano land. And I'm so excited and just overjoyed to be here to ask y'all some questions about this piece and this project, and just really let's jump right in. Let's dive right in. If folks want to go around, just say like their names and pronouns. Mine are they, them, by the way. And I'll get started with some questions.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Marisa Ramos. She, her, hers pronouns.
And I'm Francisco Rodriguez, he, him, his.
I'm Magdalena Cordoba. She, her, hers.
Thank you. Great. So what tell us a little bit about the inspiration of this piece. What was it like devising this piece and really bringing it together? I mean, in the middle of a pandemic, it's really one thing to be making a project like this.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I feel like it was because of a pandemic that a project like this existed in the first place. Is definitely from a lack of feeling overwhelmed of all of the things going on in the world and feeling like I need to put, at least where I started in the process, that I felt like I needed to say something and create some kind of art to reflect how I'm feeling, and to also like give more voice to people in the Latinx community, to see like how things are going, how real people are facing the pandemic. Yeah. That was my start. And then of course I looped Francisco in to this crazy ride with us. And then I interviewed Magdalena. And I'm so glad that they could be here to join in this panel.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. What were some were there any challenges or anything different in how you approached this piece and how you're going to put it all together with the interviews and with just devising it?
Yeah, Francisco, can you tell a little bit about the devising process, and then I'll go after you.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, first of all, and I think with trying to figure out, like Marisa said, trying to find a story that was relatable to the Latinx community, and specifically, I think when we first talked about it, we wanted it to be specifically, we're American characters in the story that have a cultural background, specifically in Mexico with these characters. So, just kind of going off of that and, talking about where our community is most affected, during the pandemic, and where our community usually is within the workforce, and really kind of talking about those situations. And then it just started to build from there. We started to build, the relationship between us and the stories behind it. We brought in a lot of our own personal, little gems, I would say, part of the storytelling, which is really cool. Yeah, and we just started building and building and building. And it really, I think it took us almost since the beginning of the pandemic. We filmed piece by piece, we talked about it, then we'd go back to it. And it was just a living, breathing thing for a while. It was really cool.
Yeah, I guess a specific challenge that I faced, or that we faced during the process, was how to be present with each other in a virtual space. And that was even in the interview process. I think it like I did 2 interviews with each of the people that were involved. And the first one was interesting because I didn't know exactly like where it was going. And then when we did the next step of interviews, that's kind of like it helped me lead. There was a huge chunk in between the first set of interviews and the second set of interviews, because it was before George Floyd, and the whole explosion of the movement that happened. And so I wanted to at least comment a little bit about that in this piece, but also like ask the interviewers or in the interviewees, because it changes a lot of how we're living our lives, and I was interested to see how that impacted real people, and so yeah, Magdalena, do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like being interviewed?
Yes, it was really interesting. I really felt like I connected with you, like you're such a sweet and empathetic person, and you're a very good listener. So to me, it was kind of a therapeutic moment because it was the moment that I took. It was in the beginning for the first interview, I remember I was just in a very, very intense emotional roller coaster because I had to transfer. I work with, I'm a speech and language pathologist. And I also do work for a community theater, a Latino program in a theater. So everything we needed to figure out how to connect with all these people via Zoom or whatever it was, like video. Therapy for speech and for a Latino community as well. So it was really, everything was confusing. Everything was intense, everything. At the same time, I felt like I'm not driving, I'm not in traffic. I can wake up and be home and be comfy. But then it was too many hours. And for some reason, in the beginning, I didn't understand why I was so exhausted. And little by little, I started getting information on how your attention to this screen for so many hours, it's really dragging of energy. It's not the same process as if you were in person, right? So then my body felt it in my back and in my neck, and it's too many hours of being sitting down. The attention on the screen, the eyes also suffer a lot. So at the moment when I had the first interview with you, it was like mostly like venting and also reflecting, like listening to myself and listening to your questions, because nobody was asking me those questions, honestly. And then for the second one, I think it was right after the movements and the manifestations. And I had been involved in those. And that's when I started going out. Because I felt like, okay, people are doing this, maybe they are doing it safely. I just want to do it too, like go to the marches or the manifestations. And I did it, and that little by little started letting me be outside and planning to be outside, and like finding ways of going to safe places, maybe on weekdays, not weekend, So in a way, it was really like self-reflecting. It helped me self-reflect.
Thank you for sharing that, Magdalena. Yeah, I mean, the amount of change that's been going on in all of our lives and how it's upended our work and our connections to family, like we see in this piece, and getting together socially, or even just politically to show up has changed so much. Why don't y'all tell me just a little bit about how the pandemic has affected y'all in maintaining connections with family and socially?
I'll go first. It's actually quite interesting, because I consider myself a introverted person, and so before the pandemic, I would find it very difficult to put myself out there and be in shared spaces with people for extended periods of time, which is funny from a theater person saying that. But it was a struggle for me. And when that completely went away, it was just like, no, I can't live like this. And so I actually found myself reaching out a lot more. And this project is something that I probably wouldn't have done before the pandemic. And I somehow got a lot of, I don't know, I gained a sense of courage, not actually being in front of people, that I think is just like expanding day by day. And to be able to like interview people and learn more about them in a very not high stakes situation kind of like gave me the freedom to work on this project and to explore, and the necessity to actually connect with people. That was so important to me, and I wanted it back. So I think that was the pressure behind kind of like forcing me to create a project like this. Not forcing, I gladly did it. But yeah, and I've also noticed like me and my parents are also talking a lot more than we used to. They don't live in the area. And so it was just like a once a week kind of conversation. But now I see myself like talking to them more, and I feel deeper connections with the people around me, even though it's mainly in this virtual space. So I think that's a good thing that happened, but it's definitely a thing that happened out of necessity because of the situation.
Yeah, I think I have a similar experience. I mean, I think when I used to live in Mexico and I had a community of friends that I would talk to periodically, but we wouldn't communicate, having FaceTime and WhatsApp and all these video chats available. Still we wouldn't communicate as often. And when the pandemic hit, when it was, everyone had to quarantine and everything, it just was like, okay, what do we do? And it was a way to force ourselves, like to resist that like isolation in a way, to be able to have access, to these services that are already like available that we didn't really take advantage of so much, I think, before. At least I didn't, and it helped also bring me closer to a lot of people around in my life that were physically farther away. And yeah, and it also, it also forced me to reflect a lot on myself and where my life was going, and what I really wanted out of life, specifically as an artist. Just because we did have time to reflect, right? Some of us stopped working, so it was definitely a very interesting. It is a very interesting process because we're still living it, right? So it's not over yet, but yeah, I think that it's really forced me to look and continue to work towards being that person I want to be, in a weird way, because of the chaos that's going on outside, so it's like really forcing me to be as grounded as I can, or work towards that person I imagine myself to be.
Okay, and to me, it went through stages. I think in the beginning, we did more video calls with my family. We're all back in Argentina, and we didn't do that before. And then it was like doing gymnastics together and doing cooking together and many things in the beginning. But then they went back to adjust to their normal lives, and we lost those activities, like or those communication types. So I think we're back to not doing any more videos. And then at the same time, because I work on the computer via Zoom or like for many hours, to me, to add more to that, it was also a little bit tiring. So I wouldn't like reach out to try to do it more.
I resonate with that so much. There was like that moment at the beginning where it was like, okay, let's connect. And like, I think that just speaks so beautifully to how just as humans, we need to see each other and we need to like show our love to each other, but also, you know, it's this double-edged sword of like the Zoom fatigue and just screen fatigue. And I remember feeling like really badly about like, it's so easy to Zoom my grandma. And I talked to her so much more the first couple months of this pandemic. And then it was like, and then I just kind of stopped because of that, just being tired and overwhelmed. Yeah. How is, can any of y'all like maybe like speak to how the pandemic has affected maybe where like other countries in Latin America? I know some of us have family out there. I have family out in Guatemala. And just maybe some of your thoughts about how other countries are handling the pandemic versus us. And yeah.
I hate to volunteer someone, but I know we, Magdalena, we did talk about this in the interview process. And you just talked about it right now, how like that side of the family basically went back to their daily lives because they were able to go back to a normal sense of daily like events. And so, yeah, I'm interested to hear more about that.
So I was kind of relieved to hear that Argentina's government from the beginning, they took it like, this is to save lives. Our priority is to save lives. And we don't know how we're going to do it. We are not like a very powerful economically country, but we do have a public health system, which is kind of strong. Many countries have it, but Argentina has public health system. So everybody at any time can go and get the health care that they need for any reason. So it was not going to be different, but also what they wanted was to, you know, like to flat the curve, like for as long as possible. So the peak that they had, it was at the end of October, close to October the 20th. Before that, it was one of the countries with the lowest amount of cases and deaths. And I think, and they were at the same time, they were building hospitals and different places where to take care of the and hiring more medical staff. So I think they were addressing it in a way that to me it was important to feel like, okay, my family is in a place where from the government down, people are saying this is serious, this does exist, and it's happening, and it's going to happen to every place in the world, and we need to address it seriously and really take care of the lives, because if we lose people, there's nothing to do for them after. So so I was happy in that sense. Then of course politics and economics started to play a role in it. So people started to ask and request that this was a politically tendencies decision from the government, and that they really needed to open everything, you know, like more on the right side, or entrepreneurs and people that had like companies, they wanted to open, so they pushed really hard, and I think the government needed to cave in at some point. So they started opening more, but in the beginning it was very controlled, really controlled. And they had fines for going out. They will take your car away if you were on the streets without a permit. You couldn't take public transportation. Everything was closed. So, but at the same time, the numbers were really, really low for a long time. So I was proud of the way that they did it. And then I think that nobody really knew how to do it, or when to do what. So in a way, they kind of saved time. They flattened the curve for as long as they could.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's always one of the things when you have family out of the country. You're just like, my God, please be safe. Like, and it's so good to hear when countries are responsible and are putting the care of the people first and foremost. Yeah.
Yeah, and contrast that with, I guess my experience would be with my family, who my parents live back in Iowa. And every time I would talk to them, I would be all like, are people wearing masks around you? Did you go anywhere? Did you eat out? Was it outside seating? I was just like, I fixated upon these like safety safety practices that we actually implemented, at least for the most part, in the Bay Area. And to see a completely different response where my parents would tell me that people aren't wearing masks in Iowa, and that they like just weren't taking it as seriously as they were here. And that it's very nerve-wracking, because we're not out of the woods yet, and they're still there. And I think about it all the time, and thank God for FaceTime, so that I can actually see them and see that they're doing well. Yeah.
Francisco, do you have any?
I don't.
Oh, yeah. Actually, we are gonna start taking some questions in the Q&A. I'll keep an eye on that. But in the meantime, I'm sort of, to speak to that still of like, even between states, it's not even about countries, even between states, even between LA and the Bay. Like at the beginning, I was just like,
Orange County, like mind-blowing.
Yeah.
They wouldn't laugh at people wearing masks.
Exactly. Yeah. Like my abuelita's down in San Bernardino, and they like don't care. And like even my grandma and grandpa, like my grandpa's a white man and my grandma is Latina. But she's like, everything needs to be clean. You're in the separate bedroom from me because you're like insisting on going out to work on bikes. You do not touch me. And he's like, oh, I think it's political and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, your whole family is a bunch of Latina women. Shut up. Like, also, we love you, but stop it, Grandpa. You're putting everyone at risk. It's wild. It is so wild, the cultural differences on like treating family and treating people. I don't know. That's a whole other thing. Let's see. Am I even looking at the Q&A? No. Okay, so we don't have any questions yet. I do have a question about the Latinx community. I mean, if, how have you each, in your own sort of circles, social circles and communities, local communities, have you noticed any effect that has specifically happened due to the pandemic on Latinx communities? Like, how is that? What has the reaction been?
Yeah, so I initially wanted to do this project because of the news that was coming early on about how Black and Brown communities are being affected adversely by the coronavirus than other populations. And so I wanted to get the story from actual people, and I wanted to see if I could connect with my my heritage through that, and see what people in my community are facing. And so a lot of my questions initially were like, as a Latinx artist, or as a person from the Latinx community, how do you think you're being affected differently? And we did talk about that a little bit, but what was shown to me was that people are people, and they're not, even though we have these labels put upon us, we don't live within the label. And so a lot of the interview answers were just normal people experiencing life, experiencing the same pandemic, seeing these numbers affect their community adversely and not knowing necessarily how to respond to that and feeling grief because of it. And so that's something interesting in the interview process that I found.
Yeah, it's like also how the media wants to portray that too, like how it might be different for different demographics, but like, what is the motivation behind those types of statements?
I feel like if anything, it might be due to the disadvantages that already exist, right? Like I work for a school district that has mostly Latino and low income community, and they were not having the same connectivity, school services provided to them because they didn't have access to it. I was giving speech and language therapy to kids on phones, on the abuelita's phone, with 6 family members around them in the same room, some of them watching TV and some of them playing and screaming and mom cooking and or parents working and not helping them, not knowing how to help them connect to the Zoom for this therapy sessions. Many of them didn't know how to download something on a phone, an application. So I think to that extent, it's just the transfer of the disadvantages. And then another thing that that made me think about it is we have one American person in our Latino group, right? She wanted to be part of us. And one day I told her lately, one of my single mom's friends, she has 3 children, but 2 of them are little, and she was going through a very, very hard time. And she asked me to have the kids doing the online school here at my house for a week. And we said yes. So the 2 kids came, mom brought them, she left them, and they stayed here for a week. So when I told them at our theater class, this lady said, but there is a pandemic, so you're not supposed to let them come to your house. And then the director, who's a Latino person, said, we never say no. We're Latinos. We're not going to say no. We cannot have your children if you're not able to have them in your house for a week. So we know that we were taking risks, but at the same time, we needed to make that decision, or we felt we needed to make that decision. And that made me think, like when she said that, she said, when there is a pandemic, you are not supposed to see anybody. Nobody's supposed to come to your house. And she was like very adamant about it. Like there is rules and you don't break. And then I go like, okay. And the Latino director said, that's how we are. And that's why, and she said, and that's why the Latino community has more cases. So I don't know to what extent there is more into this kind of being more like a community, or sharing more spaces, or sharing more the daily lives. Might have something to do with it.
I think
because go ahead.
I don't
No, I was just gonna say that I feel like I'm talking too much. That was something that I was interested in exploring as well, because the Latino community is very much a family community and a very tight-knit a community in general. And so it was interesting. Connections obviously are very international. And so that was a very interesting thing to see, that international aspect of it, having family members in a different country, and like how technology would aid in that. But yeah, go ahead, Francisco. I interrupted you.
It's okay. I was gonna talk about, I think the experience of having to have your kids, go to school from home. And I think, like, for an example, it's going back to the episode where one of our family members in the episode works in the fields, and that's very typically usually a member of the Latinx community, working in the field. So, and that's not, these regulations or these solutions to these issues of school, can serve a certain, certain social economic, community, whereas, this is a community that exists, and, having, the parents not being able to stay home with their kids and being able to help them with their Zoom, and even, people who are not working. For example, Marisa's character was at the grocery store, so she never was able to stay home, but her kids do, and they have to stay home, and figuring that out, because some people don't have that opportunity to work from home, and they still have to be in their service job or whatnot, and how a lot of the time it's part of people of our community as well. So like trying to figure that out, like how am I going to have my kids, how are they going to educate themselves in this time? What is really happening? It's trying to juggle all of that, so I think that sheds a light on specifically on what's happening and affecting. And if you think about it, sometimes, like grandma would take care of, the grandchildren. It's very common, especially like in Latinx families. Usually maybe grandma doesn't know how to use technology, and has no idea how to help, their grandkids when it comes to, these issues, or if they're even doing their homework, they see them on the computer, right? And because they don't have that connection, you know, there's a whole other avalanche of, the other side to that maybe, they're getting behind in school, and they're not getting the education in a timely manner as we think they're getting it, right? So there's all these other things I think that are playing and working alongside with what's happening,
Yeah. I have two parents who are in education. My mom is a vice principal, and her school is primarily Latinx and Black families, serving like young elementary school students who like have a lot of like siblings, and my mom like goes to their home sites, and so it is a risk for her, but also, she needs to make sure go to each household to make sure that kids are logging on, kids have hotspots, kids can get access to their education, because otherwise, unless you have money and you can have your private pods for in a lot of I've seen a lot of like suburban families in Berkeley are able to have like private school pods and can afford private tutors and that sort of thing, but when public education, you rely on that. There's so many challenges that school districts are facing as far as getting yeah, accessible education for folks. And one of our attendees actually had a very relevant question and comment where they said, I worry that we're just going back to the dysfunctional normal when the vaccine becomes available. And I think since quickly we're running out of time, there's a really great question that I'd like us to sort of end on. They ask, what do you want to remember about this experience, or what lessons do you hope we will have learned?
Yeah, it's hard because I know the audience member and I are not the only ones that are feeling this sense of like dread of like, is it just going to go back to the way things were normally done? Are marginalized communities going to continue to be disenfranchised? Are the terrible inequities that we have in our own country just going to continue and go back? Is nothing going to be fixed, basically? But pandemics, at least, only happen every 100 years, and it's quite a huge event. And I don't think anybody that any of us know have ever been a part of something like this. And there's over 250,000 people that have passed away in our country because of the virus. So it has affected everyone in this country. It has touched every single one of us. And there just there's nothing going back from that. A very wise person once told me that people don't change unless there's death involved. And so I think it's a huge stake, and people are, even if you didn't die from the virus, there are complications that are probably going to follow you, unfortunately. And so, like, given, for instance, the healthcare system, it can't be the same. Things are changing so drastically that the same just doesn't exist anymore. And I'm holding on to that hope that we can come together and make change happen and make a better life, so that if there is another pandemic, we'll be more prepared and we'll be able to survive it better.
Yeah, that's definitely the hope, and we got to hold on to it. We got to hold on to each other. Magdalena, Francisco, any final thoughts, lessons learned, memories to keep?
I think I always thought that family time and connection time is really important, but then I'm a planner, and I had plans all the time, and I was out of the house and I didn't know how to say no to social life, and I feel like I needed to put myself out for others. And now I can feel now how being home longer, it helps me connect to myself and to my family. So I'm dedicating time, like making a habit of taking time for my health, like walking every day, and cooking and eating what is healthy for me. So that I hope to keep that for sure, and then having more time, like low key time at home. That I don't feel like we need to do important or exciting things outside, or expose my daughter to everything cultural or fun or age appropriate. I think it's like, because I think like moms, we get all this information about what our kids are supposed to be seeing and doing and exposed to, right? And I just want to expose her to some boring time at home, and not doing anything and not seeing people for at least for a little more than before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that self-care piece is so important. Francisco?
I think it just it was through just moment to moment. I think with things as life is, you know, we really can only enjoy what's in front of us here and now. And it's a big reminder to stay there, you know, and because we can worry about the future, we can worry about the past, but the reality is those things don't exist. What only really exists is what's in front of us. So trying to enjoy and fully experience every moment, which is challenging, but, you know, really, you know, practicing on reminding myself of that.
Staying present. Yeah. With that, I want to thank you all three. We are going to show a preview of the next episode in just a bit, but thank you, Magdalena, Francisco, Marisa, for bringing this project together and sharing it with us and sharing your joy.
Yeah, thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.